We had a complete sound design, sound effects during the mix for the shootout, and I basically threw it all out. Thank you.
Can we talk just quickly about where this movie came from, the origins of the story?
The origins of the story. I had a friend named Charlie Adamson who was in the major crime unit of the Chicago Police Department, and he killed the real Neil McCauley in 1963 in Chicago. And Charlie was telling me about this guy, and there was this wonderful duality about how Charlie thought about it, and it was that this guy was such a high-class professional thief. He was such a great pro. He had so much discipline. Look how smart he was to do this, and look how smart he was to do that. You know, and if we were just met in the bar or something, I would have had a lot of rapport with him. We'd have been friends. And his regard for the guy wouldn't have made Charlie hesitate for 2 seconds to hunt him down, and eventually got into a shootout after a foiled robbery. And that, it wasn't a contradiction of two different ways of being or thinking at all. It was that both were true at 100%, and one didn't diminish the other, and that became kind of the core, kind of the kernel of the idea for the film. And so Hannah is based on a combination of really dedicated detectives or hunters, and Charlie's one, Bill Anhart's another, a friend of mine, Don Ferrone, who is in the DEA, is a third, and they're very, very special. They are men who they actually do the exact inverse of what a director does. A director knows his characters, understands the character's motivations, expresses those and what the character may do in a certain scene, and then the scene's over. The detective shows up after a crime has occurred, sifts through what's been left for him, tries to reconstruct the event, tries to then figure out the motive, and then locate the character. So, and the people who are really good at this, it becomes an addiction. There's a line in the film in which Justine says to Hannah, all you are is who, or actually Hannah says, all I am is who I'm going after, and it really becomes it's a special kind of a high. So it's kind of an addict. But anyway, that's that was the origins of it.
And these two characters, one of the extraordinary parts of the film is that we see it from both of their point of view, and that the collision, their fates are forever intertwined. Like they are. Is that how you see it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more than that. Both of them are fully self-conscious. They're fully self-aware. They ask themselves, "What is like we all do? What's my life? What should my life be? What do I want in my life?" Men in prison ask themselves that in a very intense way. If I ever get out, what kind of life am I going to have? And if they're very smart, if they're autodidactic, like Neil McCauley certainly is, then that becomes a very pressing question. And I was trying to make every character and every character's relationship a little universe unto itself, so that the way they thought about life determined what was going to happen to them in the course of the film. So Neil being very rigid and having a kind of a catechism of non-attachment. If he deviates from that, there's real consequences. And for Krisha Hurlis, who was also a real person, by the way, it's a whole different kind of postmodern attitude and a postmodern kind of an outcome. But then the challenge became, once I had the end of the film, it went something like this: if we're empathetically connected to Neil McCauley and want Neil to evade Hannah and be able to leave with Edie, and if we're also, when we're with Hannah, we want him to. We're mostly connected to his concerns, which has to do with his troubled stepdaughter, his third marriage breaking up, and his pursuit, his hunting of Neil McCauley. We want him to intercede and get Neil McCauley. Can I make all of that still hold audience at the end when the fated collision of these two men is going to occur? Because it's and I think I always believe the audiences were capable of maintaining themselves in that kind of dual kind of dimensions at the same time. So that's what the film that's what was so exciting and challenging to me about doing the picture.
And what would you like the audience, they're about to watch this brilliant movie. Is there anything you would like further for them to look for, or for them to see in the movie?
These are real life. These are real people. Christian Hurlis was called Trismegistus on the streets of Chicago, which meant because he constantly survived. He was like a magician who survived. His wife, played by Ashley Judd, is a real person. So is Hannah. So is Neil McCauley. The whole crew. It's and what was most challenging and most exciting is when you can draw from people, dimensionalize them, try to deliver their full humanity, and do that divorced from some of the archetypes that myself and everybody else tends to fall into, and bring something fresh. That's what the film tries to do. So,
well, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy Heat, and
Thank you
we'll
very
be
much.
back afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Mann.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
What do you think about when you watch that movie now?
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming to see this on a big screen. This is, we've been looking at individual reels, but this is the first time I've sat through it. Watching it projected like this, and so thank you very much for coming to share it.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Watching it now, 20 years later, what goes through your mind?
Everything, but it's a different experience every time I see it. But the eyes of the actors, particularly when it's projected like this, you really, because you don't get it. No, even on an 80-inch, whatever it is, you still don't get it. They were so good, Val and Bobby and Al and everything. You just, I was just sitting there watching. I forgot how good they are until you see it on the screen that's large. You can just hold on their eyes. They're just it's just truthful. There's no performance. I think that's because everybody was, as an ensemble, we were all so into character of the milieu of the movie as well as the individual people. Everybody worked on this for a long time before we started shooting. So everybody was in this deep of character before rehearsals. So it wasn't.
Can you talk about the casting? Where was Pacino and De Niro and Val and all those actors, those incredible actors? Were they all up front in your mind when?
The scene in which Bobby first meets, in which Neil meets Edie, Amy Brenneman, is at a place called the Broadway Deli, which isn't there anymore. And Art Linson and I, who's the producer, we were having breakfast there, and Art had just read the screenplay, and he said, you've got to direct this thing. So I was actually thinking of producing it, not directing it. And so I went back and read it, and then we had breakfast again there, so then we started discussing who might be in it, and it was obvious that it was Bobby and Al. So I talked to Al, Art talked to Bobby, and kind of came together. And then and I'd always wanted to work with John Voight, and I knew him somewhat, and so then it was Voight, and then Val Kilmer in that role, and Tom Sizemore, and.
And can you talk about the training and the research that you went through with the film?
Well, the research was living with and knowing some of these people, and Tom Elfmont, who plays the desk clerk at the hotel, is a commander in LAPD, plainclothes, and he and I spent, must have been 9 months, way before we even got into pre-production. Every Friday and Saturday night, I go hang out with him, and we would just answer radio calls from about 9 p.m. to like 2 in the morning on Friday or Saturday night, just rolling through the city on whatever was happening. And that's where we got the TV man. He's a real guy. We found him. He just walks around with his console TV. So we found all these characters that wound up populating this. But the real, that sense of the real vibe of Los Angeles at night, and that's where that comes from. I couldn't begin to go into all the research because we did so much of it. A lot of it's with real people. John Voight's basically playing Eddie Bunker. Eddie Bunker was an old-time L.A. bank robber who went to San Quentin and Folsom and wrote the best convict or prisoner novel in American literature called No Be So Fierce, which Dustin Hoffman made into a movie called Straight Time. And I wrote the draft that Dustin Hoffman was going to direct. And we shot in Folsom for 3 days, and then went back to Folsom to do a movie that we called Jericho Mile. So I had spent a lot of time in Folsom. Thank you. So I spent a lot of time in Folsom by this point. I spent a lot of time with the men. I had 28 convicts in speaking roles, so I really got to know that mentality, Neil's mentality. And we talked a little bit about Hannah. But then we did everything. All the training, whether it's Ashley Judd talking to middle-aged real estate women who were very respectable, who 15 years earlier had been turning tricks on Van Nuys Boulevard because they had 3 kids and their husband was in prison, and what the difference between turning tricks and coming home and making love to your husband, what that was to get that hardness, to get that attitude, or everything to do with the mentality of these real men as thieves. We went in and actually cased a bank, and they didn't know there was Bob and Val and Sizemore, and they came out. They were armed with weapons that didn't have. They weren't loaded, and the only people in the bank who knew were the security. We had LAPD with us, but nevertheless, the idea of going in and coming out and being able to say, here's when we go in, here's where the cameras are, here's where the guards are. So we did everything. So.
And what was the process of shooting that incredible downtown gunfight?
We'd only get to city on weekends, on Saturday and Sunday. So we did it on, we changed the work week. Instead of a Friday to Saturday work, it's Monday to Friday work week, we had a Wednesday to Sunday work week. And then every Saturday, Sunday, we would go downtown, and so it was blocked and planned months before we shot it, and then it was built on the LA County Sheriff's ranges. And so all the training for that, where every post was, every piece of cover they have was all represented by flats. So all the gun training was all live ammo, and so that by the time we came to do the bank robbery, obviously it wasn't live ammo, it was blanks. Came to the bank robbery, we had to segment it. So that meant you were working on completely different material on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday we'd pick up where we left off on the bank robbery. It came from a perception of some people I had brought in to help with the training, Mick Gould and a guy named Steve Mitchell, who writes under the pseudonym of Andy McNabb, and both are very heavy-duty essayists. And there was a simple line that showed up way early on, and they said, well, the police are always an overwhelming power, and they don't do well when they're actually assaulted by the military or by guys like this. And so that perception, that became the drama, the drama that informed the choreography. Choreography has to tell a story, or it's not, or it's just gratuitous action. So there has to be a story to it. So.
That just speaks to the remarkable authenticity of the films and your work. You told me a great story about the restaurant where Neil and his gang have that great dinner with their wives. Can you tell
I
the folks?
I don't remember that story. It sure was Kate Manley's coffee shop.
Maybe. In terms of what was it when Charlie Adamson told you the story about his encounter with Neil McCauley? What was it about that story that intrigued you for so many years?
just the notion that in life, life's way more complex in reality than is in my power anyway to make up. That a guy like Charlie would have, and some other people like Charlie, who I talked about, Ann Hart or Don Ferrone, would have capable of that duality. That life is filled with what to the outside seems contradictions, but they're not really contradictory. That both are true, and that he has a kind of a fugue-like counterpoint that comes into play at the end of it, which was very interesting. Very interesting challenge. In the universe of the movie, what happens, the events that will occur in these lives have to do with how they believe life works or what they want out of their life. And I was alluding to that in the comments I made at the beginning. So, this is, once Neil commits to Edie, he's abandoned that kind of non-attachment, rigid, functional risk versus reward equation, and he's initially successful in spontaneously convincing her to go with him. But at the same time, he's made himself vulnerable to be kind of blown aside from his course by an emotion of vengeance, which 30 minutes earlier in the film is never in a million years would he have gone for Waingro. And the reason, if you ask yourself, well, why did Neil and Hannah have coffee with each other, is the same reason, because like pros, they know they're going to pick something up, and they know that they'll pick it up consciously, they'll also pick it up subconsciously. And what Hannah gets from it is a woman. He sees a woman alone in a car, and Neil said he had somebody, and there's a play on the word time, having enough time, both in a dream and then also so. Is those kind of intricacies were terrific to work on and work out.
I'd like to turn it over to the audience. Please raise your hand, and we will get a microphone to you. Why don't we go right there? He asked about the line in the movie "Time is luck," and you wanted to. So, did you? The question was about time is luck, and then
time is luck is what I believe in, and he's. I think Neil. Me personally, I think Neil's a very tragic, heartbreaking character, and I feel his expectations of what he wants to have in his life are tragically cut short, and I believe time is luck, so that's why I keep repeating it in all these movies you mentioned. But and then there was an image in a painting. He's a Canadian painter.
Alex Colville.
Alex Colville. There you go. Very good. That I saw of a gun on a coffee table and a window with water beyond it, and it just hit me that was a profound sense of a maintained, sustained alienation and loneliness, and that's how it impacted me in the painting, and so then I took great pains to reproduce it. There was so we found this empty house in Malibu where we shot it, and there was there's a glass wall, that balcony, that had this wonderful random seagull shit all over it. And I wanted to question, whatever you do, don't clean that off. It had a sense of being abandoned. Of course, the day we showed up, someone cleaned it off.
Ma'am?
It seems so strong and even perfect, having watched it, more than 10 times. Is there anything you would have done differently?
I might not have had the scene with Ralph. It's, when I, when I shot it, I thought it was a very good idea, but right now, watching it tonight, it feels a little too, burlesque.
Let's go here. Yeah.
Seriously, beyond that, no, not much. I mean, the look on De Niro's face when he goes through that white tunnel, and then he goes after Wangro. We shot that 3 times, and we must have spent, I don't know how many hours, and it just wasn't there. Bobby knew it, I knew it, and we just came back and came back and came back, and finally the third night, it just happened. And so no, there's very little. Particularly, and then the work of John Voight is so terrific. So that may be me because I know, we knew Eddie Bunker so well, but it's.
Sir, there's a mic right beside you.
Right. Yes, I know you're going to be busy with your Ferrari project for the next 1 or 2 years, but do you have any plans on resurrecting Jericho Mile to the big screen like you did with this one?
This wasn't resurrected. This script pre-existed L.A. Takedown, and I was very careful to own L.A. Takedown so that you're referring to the fact that I took about 40% of this screenplay and did a pilot for a television series. I was interested in expanding all these characters and expanding their lives and doing a prequel and imagine what it would be across 22 hours. So then I did the LA Takedown pilot. And then a guy I work with at NBC who's legendary, Brandon Tartikoff, he and I disagreed about the lead, and I said, no, I wanted to keep that lead. And then for better, it didn't go to series. And then it was about 2 or 3 years after that. And LA Takedown was shot in about 19, 20 days. So this was obviously a longer effort. So.
Let's go here, sir. Yeah.
My favorite scene in the movie is actually the last scene at the airport when we see the culmination of all your hard work. We see these 2 characters, these 2 protagonists coming together, and again, McCauley's not going to go back. There's the shootout. They're holding hands, and then it's just that beautiful song by Moby playing. I wanted to get some comments from you in terms of what it was like filming that scene, and do you know at that time that you were building something that would become so legendary?
No, you're doing this. You have to be just doing the story, and it's got to be fresh, and challenging, and I mean, as I'm sure everybody knows, there's nothing digital in here. I mean, they're real airplanes, and we're really on the approach to the runways at LAX. It was fascinating to shoot it because the planes were 250 feet over our heads, and so when they came through, the ground shook, and all the work we were all doing, myself, the actors, the crew, everybody, we were kind of vibrating with the intensity of it, and you could stand still and realize you'd just been standing still for 5 minutes. It felt like you were working, but you hadn't done anything, and there's something really to be said for doing it for real. You're running down a runway. It's a long lens, but there's still a plane you're running in front of. There's really not a good answer to your question. We were all, except to say that we all believed what we're doing very intensely. We were all totally in character. I was in character of the movie. They were in their characters. It's not something you could do now, post 9/11. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. So I enjoyed watching this movie. This is a movie that I saw in my youth and seeing it time and time again throughout my life. My question's actually related to that final scene as well. Now when I see that last scene, I think of Hitchcock's scene with the crop duster in North by Northwest, like in terms of the rhythm and the pace of the sound and the light layering in that last scene. I was wondering if that was a consideration while crafting the rhythm and the pace of the light and the sound in that final scene.
No, we're just working with this film and that scene and what we're doing. What I was trying to find before I decided to shoot at the airport, which also probably answered to your question, was something that came from the ordinary material world we're all familiar with, but yet is so depopulated of life that it feels like it's like a transient stage, or stage for transient feeling, yet it had to feel very industrial and very real. And you know, airports at night kind of make me feel that way, particularly those zones of it where people never go. There's nothing about those little buildings or that architecture that's made for people. And so that was the big, you know, impulse behind doing that. But no, with nothing is, I wasn't aware of the rhythms that you're talking about. The sounds were quite incredible. This is Dolby, this Real 10. Is Sean Belton here? This is SR, okay. Sean's from 20th Century Fox, who does this extraordinary job of archiving stuff, archiving everything they have with just tremendous responsibility, and was responsible for putting together this print from a number of film prints. So that's, so Real 10 was analog, right? Okay. The ultimate way to see this is probably with a, you know, with a mag, seeing with a silent print and with a mag off the original 6-track. But the sounds are incredible. We had a complete sound design, sound effects during the mix for the Shootout, and I basically threw it all out and went with the production sounds because they were so incredible. And the same thing with the airplanes. So.
Just time for a couple more. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, thank you so much again for such an incredible and timeless film.
Good.
I'm just wondering, when you were writing it, if you were tempted to change history at all, I'm wondering who you were rooting for.
The answer to that is this gentleman could refer to both leads as protagonists. They're both protagonists. And so the whole idea of it is formed by Ford Maddox, Ford Good Soldier, which is a novel that has a kind of a subjectivity that revolves with each character. When you're in a chapter about one character, you see all of life from his point of view. And so that's part of the underlying structure to this narrative. So it was always going to end this way. What I came to later was to try and get that perfect equivalence of the connection. And the thought that occurred to me was that Neil was fortunate enough to die with in contact with the only other guy on the planet who was really very similar and almost like him and understood him totally. And to counterpoint that with the fact that it's also the person who had just killed him, but that didn't count or didn't matter at that moment. And so that became kind of the end of a dialectic, which I then reverse engineered into a lot of previous scenes that preceded it to build up to that final moment.
Yes.
Could you speak a little bit about how you visually design a scene? Speak a little bit about how you visually design a scene in terms of, there's so much in this film and many of your films where shots and moments are seem very impressionistic, very poetic, which would completely go against, you know, films of the similar genre. There's shots in this where you end on objects or background or shots you have out of focus that are thrown, like, and it really works in a very, very poetic way. But I'm just curious how you design a scene, how you approach it. You talked about a painting reference before, and does that always inform you? How you shot list?
You know, everybody's work evolves. And at the time, I was very interested in negative space. I was interested in asymmetrical compositions and the things that would subjectify the experience of the film. That was the one imperative that I wanted to do. I wanted, to the extent that I could, bring audience subjectively into moments and scenes and characters. So if you think of a scene where Van Zandt hands the paper to Hugh Benny, who's coming in, and there's a piece of paper and there's a kind of reflecting sphere and there's an out-of-focus statue with no arms, no legs. So these things kind of, you know, it's a combination of, I know the feeling I want to get, and the set decoration and production design is kind of getting it there, and then we move a couple objects around, you know, during shooting. You know, for me, it comes with knowing exactly what you want to do, not necessarily how you're going to do it, but knowing exactly what you want to do in as much detail as I could as I could get. But I'm very interested in asymmetry and negative space. I think that a lot of definition of moments comes from, or in character comes from the anomalies. So I start to look for what's anomalous in a character's behavior, because that's going to give him real, that's going to increase the specificity of identity. And then I think that audiences we're way smarter than we know we are. Perceptually, we're brilliant. Our amygdalas register truth or not truthfulness way before our cerebral cortex even can name it, maybe way before, a couple 100,000th of a second. But audiences' perception is quite brilliant. And so I've always felt that it's my responsibility, my job, to use all these tools and constantly try to use these tools to intensify the experience.
In this, can you give an example of an anomaly you just mentioned?
I don't know. John Voight's hair, his shirts, his bolo tie. At one horrible moment in the film, just after Neil kills Danny Trejo, he's holding a glass with Campari in his little fingers up. I mean, it's just, you know.
Well, I want to remind everyone that TIFF Cinematheque has movies, classic movies, great movies like this, every day outside of festival. And Mr. Mann, I want to thank you so much for making my dream come true.
Thank you again. Thanks for coming.